Welcome back to Secret Leaders. It's been a little while since we've been together. So in case you've forgotten, I'm Dan.
I'm Chris.
And welcome to a little catch up between us. Lots been happening.
So what's been big news in your life, Dan?
Well, seeing as you asked, one of the reasons for my somewhat haggard performance in December, throughout December, was I was solo parenting for a while because my wife was very, very, very sick.
Wow.
And we couldn't tell anyone why, but it was because we are expecting another child. So
Unbelievable.
very, very grateful, very happy having another daughter.
Yeah.
So going full girl dad mode.
Yeah.
And
three girls and you in the house.
yeah, exactly. It's just so, I love it, honestly. This morning,
you've got enough masculine energy for the rest of us, though. So
yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm not sure that the other ladies in my house would agree with that, but this morning, a perfect example. Wake up, get my daughter out of her cot, get her dressed, and say, "Daddy, can we play dollies before we go down?" And I'm like literally sitting there playing dollies this morning and thinking, "This is the life." I actually quite like it.
Yeah.
Dollies is quite fun.
Yeah.
It's just make believe.
That is a very different morning to mine.
Yeah, exactly.
But all to look forward to.
All to look forward to. So anyway, moving on from dollies, that's been exciting in my life. So what I am preparing to become a dad again. You had some big news of your own as well.
What is the big news?
Well, you, sir, are the #1 LinkedIn creator on Earth.
Oh God, you're having a child, and I'm getting a ranking on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
that's the state of life. But yeah, I mean, it's the most bizarre thing. Not necessarily something that you are aiming at, nor necessarily care about achieving because you just get ranked. But it must be to do with views more than anything. So it is funny because you obviously get to know who's like number 2 and 3, and in the screenshots you get sent by the ranking company, it was like it's like Bill Gates one week and then the next week it was Barack Obama.
Really?
And so it's like you look at these things, they're completely stupid. I obviously don't sit here thinking I'm the most influential person on LinkedIn in the world. That's ridiculous, but it is cool in a sense that 2 years ago, I was like, I would love to build a personal brand on LinkedIn. At the time, everyone was like, it's insane or lame. Most of the feedback at the time wasn't that it was insane. It was like, what are you doing? It's so lame. Whereas now everyone's like, oh, I understand that, if you build a good LinkedIn profile and you build a good personal brand, you can drive loads of business. So I am really happy about it because in some ways, like a lot of what I do now is try and teach entrepreneurs about how to think about profile building. So it's quite nice to be able to be like, I'm practicing what I preach.
Okay, I've got more questions for you. But before we do that, let's get a quick break from our sponsor, Wise, and we'll be right back. Managing international money used to drive me crazy until I found Wise Business, the account for doing business in other currencies. I can hold money in different currencies and only convert when the rates are good. No more rushing to exchange at bad rates or losing money on outrageous fees. And my team handles all the payments themselves. I don't have to micromanage anything. They have their own logins, set their own limits, and I just keep an eye on things from my phone. One simple account lets you pay and get paid in over 40 currencies. There's no hidden fees, no marked up exchange rates, and it connects right to your accounting software. Whether you're paying vendors or suppliers in Europe or you're getting paid from Australia, it's all just easy. And that's what I love about Wise. It just takes this complicated thing and it makes it really simple. Your money's always secure with 24/7 protection, and you can see exactly where everything is in real time. To learn more about how you can use Wise Business to save time, money, and stress, visit wise.com/business. And we're back. So what would you say, what's your top 3 tips for anyone who wants to build a big profile on LinkedIn?
I think to be honest, nowadays, I'm certainly never telling people to build a big profile. Like I would say, if you have a business and you can create the relevant content for your relevant audience, and you can drive them through your LinkedIn to your business, then it's an unbelievable outcome. And I think like I first really discovered it years ago when I was running Verb, because my profile was very much about luxury content, luxury brands, luxury design. And most of our clients were coming through LinkedIn. And then through the years of building Lottie, all of our staff came through LinkedIn. All of our investors found us through LinkedIn. Most of our original care home partners saw us posting on LinkedIn. And so I I suppose these days it's a foregone conclusion that obviously building a personal brand has a massive impact on your business. And so when people are like, I would love to have loads of followers, I would always be like, what's the reason for having lots of followers?
Yeah, and often it's all about not how many, but who follows you.
Totally. And, I think that you can both have a big audience that's also a good audience. And so for me nowadays, yeah, if I'm speaking to a young entrepreneur, I would say that it would be useful alongside marketing for the company to put some time and effort into growing your personal brand, simply because, if you think about all the different potential customers and, partners and so forth in the industry who already exist, they will be looking for people to partner with. If you're the known person in your niche or sector, you will get most of the opportunity. And so I just think it's now like, it's very clearly understood now that building a good brand in your space makes sense. And so, yeah, that's the advice I would give people is like, it takes a long time. It's definitely not easy. It doesn't happen overnight. Like, I think people underappreciate how much time and effort goes into building a good personal brand. And especially, something like LinkedIn or any of these channels nowadays, the quality of content has gone up so much because you're competing against people who really want the attention. I'll take an example, but if you're like a marketing agency founders, there's loads of them creating incredible content. And so if you want to compete against them for the attention of the brands, you've got to make incredible content.
Yeah, and it's all about creative, right? And who's going to have better creative than creative and marketing companies?
Totally. Like, there's no surprise that a lot of the really big names on social these days are people who either work in or worked in digital marketing of some degree, social marketing, like Steve Bartlett, Gary Vee, like they're all creative marketers.
Yeah.
And they've built their personal brands enormously. Like my first business was an agency. So I understand how the dynamics of the platforms work. And so I feel, yeah, it's a bit of a competitive advantage, but we live in a digital world. So if you're gonna build, personal brand and get awareness, even if you were to work in, if you were a window cleaner, but you had a great personal brand where you showed incredible window cleaning and the impact and whatever, you would get so much more business than the people who don't. So obviously you said a second ago, and I think it's very true, is that it's not necessarily the amount of followers, it's who follows you. And I suppose the connectivity that putting yourself out there sometimes gets you. So you had a really cool thing happen a few days ago.
Oh yeah.
You were followed by, one of the biggest entrepreneurs in the world, and suddenly now they're just following you and your, great content every day.
Yeah. And engaging is what I'm saying. Getting the odd likes and stuff from him.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, Mark Benioff.
Yeah.
Followed me on Twitter. And yeah, for those who don't know, Mark Benioff is the founder and CEO of Salesforce. So he's pretty much one of the founding fathers of SaaS, software as a service. Salesforce is I think over 300 billion market cap company. He himself is worth over $10 billion. He's one of the most successful, wealthiest people in the world. And he's massively influential for a whole bunch of reasons. Number one, they pretty much invented SaaS, right at the start. Once Salesforce is in your business, it's the stickiest thing ever. You don't take it out. Yep. They do enterprise. So they are pretty much, the piping for how all sales teams, account managers, everyone at all size businesses ever basically run on Salesforce. So it's a nightmare to take out. It's recurring revenue forever. You are just locked in. And, the other side of it is, if you've ever been to San Francisco, there is a period of time, there's a week where they do something called Dreamforce. Dreamforce is their global conference. What they did, which is super unusual, they're like the first company to do this. They create basically a conference. I mean, they had insane people. I think they even had like Beyonce and people there, right? They were just like, hey, we're not just like some boring SaaS company. We're going to put on the best event in the whole world. And we're going to invite the best speakers, and it's invite only. But they shut down San Francisco pretty much. The top of like buildings are like all advertised as Dreamforce, Dreamforce, like San Francisco, like comes to pretty much a halt because people fly in from all over the world to go to Dreamforce.
Jeez.
So it is incredible to see how actually A company that size with so much plumbing inside enterprises can think so deeply about what brand means and what experience means, and to bring people into your ecosystem, even if all you're really doing is selling like a sales, CRM platform. It's not very interesting. There's always a real je ne sais quoi of how the big thinkers, big dreamers ultimately can create massive impact. And Dreamforce is just a great example of executing a brand like Salesforce and how to bring people into it with excitement. So anyway, yeah, he followed me. He's been starting to engage with me on Twitter. The reason this is actually relevant and interesting, said it doesn't always about, how many people follow you, but who follows you. If you're putting out thoughtful content on the idea of, personal brand, if you're putting out thoughtful content, on Twitter, most of my content is around longevity, health, yes, entrepreneurship as well, but more on the sort of mindset and psychology side of things around health and longevity. You never know who's going to read it. You never know who follows you. And actually, I've got some phenomenally interesting people that follow me on Twitter and engage with my stuff. And you don't know where that's going to go in the future. Maybe if Mark's coming to London, that's a direct in. I can just drop him a message in the inbox and and actually physically ask him, do you want to come and do an episode?
Totally.
So it depends what your industry is. Obviously, on one side, my business is Heights, and on the other side, running a podcast and interviewing people. So having people like that are aware of you and are choosing to engage is different to just going through PR companies.
Yeah. And I also think like people sometimes forget that especially in entrepreneurship, if you're doing entrepreneurship for long enough, you will do multiple companies. And so if I look at my own career for a second, my first company was import-export. My second company was a education business. My third company was Verb. My fourth company was Lottie. And now I'm involved in lots of different companies. My personal brand technically has lasted through it all. And so it's, you're almost guaranteeing yourself more optionality in the future by having a network, by having an audience. And so he's now in your network. One of the most successful entrepreneurs ever.
That's totally right. And actually having him as a Heights customer would be awesome.
Yeah. Is he not?
No.
I don't meet many people who aren't.
No, sorry. So come on board, Mark. But, if and when we sell Heights, that won't matter anymore, so to speak. I won't have a direct relationship with him anymore. Unlike, obviously, if he follows me personally, whether or not I sell Heights, I can still reach out to him at any point. So
totally.
To your point, that is the difference between having customers for your company and followers for your own personal brand. There are two separate things, and both are important.
Totally. Like I would say these days, most of my companies that I invest in come through my personal brand. They will reach out to me directly. They will pitch me through my personal brand. Again, it just gives me unbelievable amount of optionality. I can push them lots of traffic. I can get them customers. And so the optionality of it all is, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, I think it's kind of unmatched. So obviously you're coming up to having your second kid.
Yeah.
Another girl. Very exciting.
Yep.
How are you and how do you think about paternity leave because again, I think some people won't know this about you. You own multiple different companies. You don't just run one company, you run multiple companies. You are very involved in like the founder community, as it were. How do you think about paternity leave? How are you going to manage that?
So the first time I had a child, we implemented a paternity leave policy where you get 4 weeks, but you can break it up how you like. Because doing some research, speaking to mums is as important as speaking to dads. And then also the other side, did your wife end up having, what's called a natural birth or a vaginal birth, or was it a C-section? Recovery's different. These things matter. So with a C-section, which is what my wife ended up having to have, so cesarean, the recovery is much longer. That's like 4 to 6 weeks. It's major surgery. So it's 4 to 6 weeks of proper surgery, quite bedbound, all this kind of stuff. So, I was trying to not be too rigid. What does my wife need? I don't know. She doesn't know. If you get an infection, that's going to change things. There's so much stuff that happens. Usually with so-called a natural birth, recovery can be next day. So if everything's okay, that's what your body is designed to do, right? Your body is designed to go through that. As a woman, as intense as it is, your body's not designed to go through surgery. So very, very different. And so for us, we have 4 weeks. And, I chose to break it up with 2 weeks at home at the start. Then my wife started recovering really well, no infections, et cetera, et cetera. And we decided what made the most amount of sense was, instead of doing 4 weeks up front and just being around the whole time, Because let me tell you, as a dad, in my experience, you're just literally like a plodding plonker. Like you've like cleared your schedule.
No one needs you.
No one needs you. And also for the first time in my life, I properly cleared my whole schedule. I was like, right, no one can contact me. I'm on paternity. It's this incredible spiritual experience.
Well, this time Margot will need you.
Well, exactly, right? And it'll be a totally different experience again.
Yeah.
But the uselessness, I've never really felt it before. Like that level of, I'd already told everyone not to contact me about work. So I was yearning for
And everyone
work.
respected it?
Everyone respected it. No one got in touch about that. And it's sort of a mutual contract where you therefore can't really start to do work because you will look like a terrible dad. So it works both ways.
So you do just have to plod around.
You just plod around waiting for any help that's needed, but they're breastfeeding and no one does need any help. And so, obviously you're doing nappies and wake ups, but whatever. Anyway, it's a bit of a blur. So after 2 weeks, we were like, okay, the most sensible thing is actually to extend this as long as possible. So I was like, okay, the next 2 weeks is technically 2 blocks of 5 days. That's 10 days. Why don't I, for the next 10 weeks, take off Fridays? So for the next 10 weeks, we will have a week where it's 4 days on work, 3 days off. And actually, that's pretty much half and half of a week. Like in most cases, it's pretty much 50-50. And that'll be extending it over 10 weeks. Why didn't we do that? And that's what we did. And it was really, really helpful. And it actually meant that after, I think, 4 weeks, we went on a long weekend. So the other thing that happens when you have your kid for the first time, you're a little bit like, oh God, everything's hard now. So do we still go on staycations? Do we still go away? Do we still live this exciting life that we used to live? And, the reality to all those questions is at some point you will choose to do that or you won't, and your whole life will change around the baby. And that what I've heard from others will lead to resentment. So the idea is kind of, you want to try to force yourself to live as normal a life as you can continuing, and the baby fits in around your life versus the other way around. And so we started booking staycations because we love going away, and we're like, we need to just check that we can do this. And after a while you're then booking your first babysitter, and that's terrifying. You're leaving your baby with a stranger and all of this stuff. But at some point you do those things. We just decided to confront it earlier. Is that 10 weeks was an incredible move, because we just used it to go away together as a little family. Now, this time round, I will probably do the same thing. But yeah, like you say, Margot's now 3. She's at nursery. And actually, baby's coming in July. She'll be starting school in September, like reception year, as they call it. So I don't know, but the policy is still 4 weeks. And it's very hard as a founder to imagine longer than 4 weeks, if that makes sense.
Totally.
That's a long time to not be working in your business. And obviously, it's so much more complicated for women founders who then have to take maternity. And that's a whole other...
Honestly, when I see, because I know obviously like the early stages of a business is actually like, and no matter what people say, to get a business off the ground is brutal. Absolutely brutal.
It's your baby.
Yeah. And you're working crazy hours. When I see founders who have like just had a kid and doing it, I'm like, how? Like, I'm so tired all the time at the start of companies.
Yeah.
And they must just go superhuman for a while.
Yeah, there's something not natural happening.
Yeah.
For sure.
They're just...
Because you're not sleeping as well.
No.
And the other problem is, the only way to solve this problem really is money. Yeah. So you can get night nurses and all this stuff, but we did none of it the first time round. This time round, I think I'll have to, right? Because my companies are so much more mature. I just won't be able to like do all of those nights. Yeah. That's just not... I was actually like, we just had to do it the first time round. We didn't have the money and weren't in the right time and all of this stuff. Now, there's no way that I would get no help whatsoever.
Yeah.
These people are crazy. Like a night nurse is like £300 a night.
Yeah.
That's crazy money, and that solves one night problem. One.
Yeah.
So it's really like not that meaningful. So we just decided to raw dog the whole thing. Just get none of it. This time round, I'm already starting to think about how to plan it better. And a really good example, I actually had this conversation with Melissa 2 days ago, which is we record Secret Leaders on Friday. So if there's ever a night where I'd get a night nurse once a week or whatever, it'd be Thursday night, because I can't be coming to a studio and interviewing people 3 times in one day with a bad night's sleep. Like, I know that's not possible. I could get away with it at heights with the excuses and sorry, I'll have a meeting and I'll have a gap, a meeting and a gap. You do this with me, bloody hard work.
Yeah.
The focus, the energy.
Doing this hungover is always very hard.
Yeah, exactly. So now do that with like 1 hour sleep throughout the night. it'd be a nightmare. So
Done a few of those.
that I've already been planning it around secret leaders actually to make sure I can be sharp in the studio. So I was talking about being on Twitter a lot. Occasionally, if you're lucky enough on Twitter to get through politics somehow. If you complete politics on Twitter, you can start to surface some really interesting
Is it just politics?
stuff. No, but
I'm not really a big Twitter user anymore.
No. But I mean a lot, right? Because Elon does so much on politics that it just fills your feed up. But if you're lucky enough and you scroll past it, you can find some really interesting stuff. And I came across a story about YouTube.
Yeah.
Do you know that YouTube wasn't originally a video platform at all?
I always get YouTube and Twitch confused. I think YouTube was dating and Twitch was Jason TV or something.
Oh yeah, that's true. It was Jason TV.
So Jason TV was the dude who
and Twitter was a podcast app. Oh dear.
Is that right?
Yeah, Twitter was podcasting.
It's interesting. Yeah. So YouTube was. What was
so
YouTube?
YouTube was basically a video dating site called TuneIn Hookup. But basically they realized the platform had broader appeal, obviously, and shifted their focus. But yeah, it was basically a dating site.
That is crazy, that. But I mean, also, I think with
Facebook
companies...
hot or not kind of vibe, isn't it?
Yeah. But I think with companies like that, they obviously make a small product and then they just follow their nose. Totally. It's like at the dawn of video on the internet.
Smart ones do.
Yeah. You don't have to keep pushing the water uphill if it's not working. But that is so cool that they went and actually built, internet-defining company off the back of a dating site.
It's crazy. If you see the original founders as well, they're so geeky, you can just totally imagine them having built
I did see this online. There are three of them sitting in a room.
Yeah.
And the room is like classically where you would start a company, crap everywhere.
Yeah.
And they're having a conversation about that. Yeah, I did see that.
And it's basically the idea was you just broadcast yourselves. You broadcast yourself. That's the idea of the dating site. But obviously, very quickly realized that people are going to do all sorts of random things if you broadcast yourself. And they're just collecting loads of really interesting videos.
Yeah. It's actually funny how many dating applications and dating things there have been which just don't work. And I don't know why. I think it's because dating apps have to be on trend and cool as well as being super functional. The amount that we've seen come and go now, it's not a business I would ever go into personally.
Or dating?
I just think it has to be cool. And if something has to be cool, it's a little bit like a restaurant and it has to always be on trend.
Yeah, true.
Which I just think is very, very, it's another bar for the business to have to hit all the time. Whereas a lot of businesses, you can just be very good at what you do rather than having to be on trend. And with dating, eventually, if you're successful, you just get bought by the biggest company in dating because you are the thing of the time. And so Match basically own every successful dating app that ever makes it. So if Tinder or whatever they make it, they become the new thing. Match then buys them, integrates them into their system, and Tinder now isn't cool.
Yeah,
or at least that's my perception of it.
Yeah. It's interesting because one of our investors at Heights was one of the co-founders of Badoo. Badoo is one of the biggest dating apps in the world. But they were massive in Russia and other parts and South America.
I haven't even heard of that.
Exactly. But what you do know is Bumble. They basically merged with Bumble and took Bumble's name. The whole Whitney Wolf and IPO and all this stuff. I don't know how much, but a huge amount of their revenue was actually from Badoo. One day you were something like, I had no idea Bumble was that big. What?
Yeah.
It was a merger of a whole bunch of other companies, repackaged up with a Bumble brand and Whitney as the front runner because she's a much more presentable. She's a great entrepreneur. I'm not saying she's not, but there's more to that story than just Bumble. It was the same thing as Match.
So it's like a buy and build merger.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a group of dating apps again.
Makes sense because it's just interconnected networks, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then good branding.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I suppose talking about acquisitions and so forth, obviously YouTube, the dating site, became YouTube and got bought by Google, which tends to just be the case of any successful software, digital business, is that they just get made part of the stack of someone else's business.
$1.6 billion. So that just feels like one of the best acquisitions of all time.
$1.6 billion to buy it.
Yeah.
And now it's probably worth
$31 billion a year in revenue per year now, YouTube.
I mean, it's like the piping of the internet.
Totally. Hence the tube actually was genius.
It is probably the most powerful thing on the internet now, isn't it?
Well, and also now we're obviously in a world of AI and actually training models and stuff, having all that video data is so valuable.
Yeah. But I also think that text, as in written text copy. Like I think there was a time where a lot of people would be like, Google can't be disrupted because they had such a hold on the internet. And now AI can very obviously disrupt that if Google don't keep up with the trend. Whereas like video feels very different. You know, it feels like if you have the right amount of video, which they do, and I suppose the competition would come from TikTok then, because they're now going long form, aren't they? But it is interesting to think like, I can't see that going anywhere. You know, it is the piping for video on the internet.
Okay, so next up, we're going to hear from, you know, the number one LinkedIn creator in the world. We're going to refer to you as the mayor of LinkedIn from now on. So as the mayor of LinkedIn, I'm going to get
I just want to state to everyone that I don't think that I'm number one on LinkedIn, and it only was for 1 week.
In my mind, you are the mayor of LinkedIn. So whether or not you're number 1 or 2, you're the mayor.
Okay.
And as the mayor of LinkedIn, I found some absolute cringe. And so I would love to get you to talk about the state of LinkedIn. However, first we'll get a little break from our sponsors. So
security compliance is one of those things that can silently derail your business. Not because it's impossible, but because most of us put it off until it becomes urgent. And by then, it's often too late. I want to tell you about Vanta because it fundamentally changed how our company handles compliance. They've built a system that automates preparing for SOC 2 and ISO 27001 certification, turning what used to be months of tedious work into a straightforward process. What makes Vanta different is that they understand this isn't just about checking boxes. It's about building trust with your customers while protecting your business. That's why over 8,000 companies, from 2-person startups to major enterprises, rely on their platform. If you're growing your business and you know security compliance is something you need to address, visit vanta.com/secret leaders. They're offering $1,000 off your first year, and honestly, it's worth every penny just for the peace of mind. It's the solution you wish you'd found years ago. Use Vanta so you don't get slowed down by security paperwork and focus on what matters, growing your business. Visit vanta.com/secret leaders now and get $1,000 off your first year.
Okay, so there's a brilliant page on X, if you haven't seen. It's called The State of LinkedIn, and it's basically peak LinkedIn cringe.
I have seen.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
How terrified are you of ending up on there one time?
Oh, no. I mean, there's a page called LinkedIn Lunatics somewhere. I can't remember what it's on. Yeah. Maybe it's like a Reddit thread. And I was definitely on it once, and someone posted my image, and they were attacking the person who commented on the profile. And I was like, oh, I've sort of narrowly escaped being on LinkedIn Lunatics. But then obviously now, you know, if you post as much as we do, you do end up on these sites. Yeah.
All right. So Chris, as the mayor of LinkedIn, first up, we got a motivational speaker and presentation skills coach who had recently released his books and had a rather unusual idea to get his biggest fan happy. Do you want to take a look at this one?
So this one is, today is a very special day. Someone I know sent me a photo of his mother who is at her final days being cared for at home by hospice staff. He sent me a picture of his mother in bed, clutching my first 2 books, which I had signed for her. We've never met, but she's a big fan. So this morning, as a very special surprise, I'm heading over to Lancashire to turn up at her home with my latest book and the trilogy. I'm going to read it to her. This will be priceless. Sometimes a random act of kindness goes a very long way. I mean, I don't even know what to say about that. Like,
well, you ran care home business. Would you do something? Would you exploit the care home people dying for a few LinkedIn 47 likes?
I mean, I don't even know what that post means, but I mean, the state of LinkedIn at the moment and the state of content at the moment is a bit bizarre in that people will do anything for traffic. And, you know, we've had like people doing their proposals on LinkedIn and therefore like people being...
James Watt.
Did he do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite him, you know, sort of stunt.
Exactly.
You know,
quite trolly.
Yeah.
Trolly and stunty.
And I think his thing now is like almost trolling the media.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
To get more press.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, for him, maybe that works. I would always think to myself, right, is that it's like we said earlier, the followers matter, the content type matters. So I don't know what this is. I mean, maybe he's just not very good at content. Is that, you know, because that's not going to drive you any positivity. People are going to take the piss out of you, and you do just come across sounding like a bit of a wanker.
So speaking of a bit of a wanker,
Yeah.
this next one says from Alexander C. I follow this guy on Twitter, so his name's actually Alex Cohen. I'm 99% sure that this is satire. It's very hard on LinkedIn, obviously, to tell the difference between satire and reality. The thing is, this guy does tweet a lot about the state of LinkedIn and how absurd other people are. So he has a particularly awful photo of Blender, which is what leads me to think it really is. And he says, I'm traveling for work, and instead of eating a fancy dinner out, I decided to cook a cheaper meal in the hotel room. Even though the hotel room didn't have a kitchen, I managed to use the coffee machine to cook chicken and butter and garlic. Hence, it's definitely satire, guys, but okay. Although my company allows me to expense dinner while traveling, I wanted to save money because I know that every dollar counts on the P&L. It's the little things that get you promoted. Hashtag promotion, hashtag career advice.
Yeah, I mean, he's clearly a troll.
That is good trolling, isn't it?
Yeah. But I understand why people do troll it, because the stuff that people post on these channels is absolutely insane. You know, like the sort of humble brag about how they help people, or you know, the one above is like, I mean, it's an awful post, but you see a lot of this stuff, like people trying to show off their kindness in a sort of wrapped up story, and I just hate it. I think it's a very bizarre thing to, and it never does well.
No. I think that's exactly the point you're saying, which is it never tends to go that well when you are trying to promote how kind you are.
Yeah.
That's basically the thing that doesn't, like, weaponizing your kindness for likes. It's difficult because sometimes you're doing generous things and you do want people to know. But there tends to never be a right way to do it. You always just end up looking like a sanctimonious twat.
Yeah.
Okay, so Chris, I'm going to, as the mayor, please give a ranking to each of these. So 1 to 5 stars. Starting with Richard McCann's motivational care home.
I mean, that's got to get no stars. He can't have 1 star for that. I mean, it's rubbish.
Fair. No stars to you, mate. And Alexander Cohen.
Well, he's got to be a troll. So in trolling, I think it's quite funny.
5 stars.
So maybe he gets some good stars for that. Yeah. So I think the main thing to talk about is Deepseek, obviously coming out and absolutely smashing OpenAI, but also having such a ridiculous impact on the stock prices of Nvidia, you know, massive drop, but also just generally the valuations on AI being smashed in the US and Europe and so forth, and how it's probably a very good thing, and how, you know, it smacks in the face of Sam Altman, who had the open source AI and then
done this great thing for humanity and gone down an absolute hero.
Closed it off and made it for profit with Microsoft and all the rest of it. So this has come out, it is open source, and it's absolutely laid waste to the stock market.
Yeah, I mean, OpenAI was meant to be open, now it's closed, and the Chinese have just brought out free and open and embarrassed them, frankly.
Yeah.
And there's this rumor, whether or not it's true, that, you know, it cost them just about $6 million to train versus, you know, OpenAI, etc., with their billions.
Yeah.
Which just shows, I don't think that's true, because obviously they actually have a whole bunch of NVIDIA, you know, like computer chips and all this kind of stuff. So, you know, they it's from a hedge fund. It's from a Chinese hedge fund, these absolute, like, quant trading geniuses. So they'll have invested tens of millions in these, you know, in the infrastructure anyway.
And the people.
Yeah, but the narrative that it cost 6 million, I think, is more just to demonstrate the fact that you can do this stuff a lot cheaper. And that actually the main thing is that the infrastructure, the way that they've generally invested in the AI space, has created this theoretical moat. And everyone was saying that basically, unless you are like in that sort of hardware core layer, building the LLMs, or you're building the compute or the chips or whatever, then this sort of surface layer of the apps and stuff isn't really where the value is. All that value is in the other space. And actually, it's looking like this demonstrates the example that the argument's completely flipped. Actually, there's so much value to be made on the layer.
Yeah.
And actually, a lot of the hard technical work that's been done is stuff that's just going to get leveraged and ripped off like crazy. You know, a bit like saying, you know, what is the IP of the internet? Well, I mean, there is no one really like monetizing the internet, but there's zillions of websites and companies all built off it. So that's been the really interesting flip of something that Deepseek can demonstrate, which is you can bring out a model that is actually as good as, if not better than, GPT-4.
Yeah.
And surprisingly,
at a fraction of the cost.
Yeah.
Have you actually used it?
So I went to download it. It's on my phone, and then I was suddenly like, I don't know if I want the Chinese government having my stuff. I was a little paranoid about it.
Yeah.
I'm the same with TikTok. I don't have TikTok on my phone either. So I'm like, okay, no. However, I do use Perplexity.
Right.
So I love Perplexity. I think it's awesome. And one of the inputs you can have in Perplexity is you can do a search query. It's like, replacement for Google for me. And then which model do you want to use?
Right.
And they brought in Deepseek R1 as one of their models within about 24 hours of Deepseek going like really popular. And so what they did is really smart. One of the things in Deepseek that blew up on the internet and was quite funny was people being like, oh my God, China's amazing. Or the Americans, right? Mostly young American socialists being like, America's awful, China's amazing, like all of this stuff. Like China's so great and America's so terrible. And then people being like, cool, now ask Deepseek about Tiananmen Square. And it's like, sorry, this is uncomfortable. Can we ask about something else? You're like, okay, now ask about the Chinese government and their policy towards people. It's like, sorry, this is uncomfortable. Can you ask something else?
Yeah.
And so there's all the censorship, right? Because Deepseek very quickly realized, cannot say anything bad about the Chinese government. What Perplexity has done is overridden that. And so if you ask the same questions, so you can ask Deepseek what it thinks about Tiananmen Square in Perplexity and get a real answer.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's actually really, really cool. So actually using Deepseek in Perplexity is like an uncensored version of Deepseek that you can't get in Deepseek.
Wow.
Cool, huh?
That is very cool.
Yeah.
I don't worry about having that stuff on my phone. There's nothing interesting enough about my life not to lay bare to the Chinese government. So I will download it and let you know how it goes. But yeah, I think that the interesting thing is that it has shaken to the core people's beliefs of the valuations of these companies.
Yeah.
Which I think is a very good thing.
Yeah, totally.
And I think that when you've got additional competition on the technology of the time, I can't see that being anything else other than positive.
Yeah, I actually invested in a company called Grok, not annoyingly, not Elon Musk's Grok, which is like XAI, but it's Grok. Grok is GROK, and there's a Grok with GROQ.
Right.
And basically, the whole principle of it is they have a different way of building the compute up. So they're like an NVIDIA competitor. And they have a different thesis behind how to do these large language models and the chips required. And, the investment to get to something like NVIDIA is exponentially expensive. And they just have a totally different approach for how they're doing the queries on their chips. So whether or not they'll ever be able to compete against NVIDIA, who knows? But it's sort of the hardware level example of what Deepseek just did to OpenAI, right? Deepseek have basically said, by asking prompts a completely different way, we use lots less energy and compute to get to really good systematic answers. So it all just costs less. And as a result, you have as good a model that's putting out maybe even better answers. Grok's theory is like a different starting principle, right? Which is, the reason NVIDIA is unbeatable is because everyone is assuming this is the only way to make the chips.
Yeah.
And we have a completely different thesis. Whether that's ever going to be a good investment or not, I've got no idea. But I like the idea of someone being like, well, that's one way. We have a completely esoteric different way.
And for the ordinary consumer and for like people like ourselves, and people who watch the show, like entrepreneurs, the war between these big companies on making compute less expensive effectively, or making the outcome of AI less expensive, is awesome. For us to be able to leverage that in our smaller SME type businesses is like an unbelievable outcome.
Yeah, so there was a thing trending around Twitter, which is called Jevons paradox.
Right.
And basically the idea of it is when you, technically speaking, when you raise the price of a lot of things, so like the compute and everything is getting more expensive and stuff, you assume therefore there's going to be more money in the market because things are getting more expensive, so the premium's going up, but people still need it and there's a demand. Jevons paradox sort of demonstrates the opposite, which is actually when you make the energy and the cost of everything go down and down and down, it spreads far further across the world. There's actually more demand for it. So even though the compute of something that used to cost $1,000 will now cost $1, you might have 10,000 people demanding it, whereas previously only 1,000 people could. So the paradox is that actually the cheaper you make all the stuff, the higher the demand, the higher the usage, the more money you get overall.
Totally.
Yeah. Anyway, AI just moves so quickly. That whole space is ridiculous. For a couple of guys in startup land, they're having to keep up with like e-commerce trends and everything else. Like, how glad are you you're not working directly in AI right now?
Yeah, I mean, all I would say is that, everyone by now has a sense that I'm definitely not trying to run a big business these days. But if I was to run a big business, it would be the only play for me right now.
Interesting.
Because I would just think again about like rising tide, put yourself where it's going to go.
But this discussion is a perfect example of how can you make that bet work. Like, you're completely right. It's the obvious big bet. But then one thing from one company in China that no one saw coming upends all the other companies immediately and everyone's work. So I actually have the counter position, which is like, I'm so glad I'm not building a company in this space right now because, you know, AI can't disrupt what I'm doing. Like, on a fundamental basis, people are still going to need nutrients, they're still going to need vitamins. Like, there are ways that AI can improve it, et cetera, et cetera. But, you know, a big change like Deepseek doesn't make a single bit of difference to a company like Heights. And there's so many companies that aren't impacted. But for the thousands of AI startups that do exist, something just comes out of nowhere every single week and changes whether or not you've got a viable business. That's pretty stressful.
Yeah, I mean, if I was trying to build a big company, that's the space I'd position myself in. I'm obviously not, and position myself in very, very different places to that. But I feel like, I mean, if you're like 21, 22 now.
If you can handle the stress and you can handle the ups and
you've
downs.
You've got 10 years of like, you know, we just had an amazing conversation with two entrepreneurs today who've both said at the beginning of their journeys with 10 to 15 years of like absolutely killing themselves, which is broadly how I identify my business career. If I had that again, AI is where I put myself. So I think that'll be a wrap for today. We have an episode coming out next week with Scott Davies. For anyone that doesn't know Scott has built, which is a lot of people. You know, he's not.
He's a true secret leader.
Yeah, he's really not focused on like the marketing and top end of his personal brand, as it were. But he's built a business that turns over 44 million a year, and he sells honey.
25% of the whole country's honey. It was amazing.
Unbelievable. And he owns 100% of the company. It's taken him 13 years to build. He sells 25% of all the honey in the UK, and he makes 44 million a year.
And it's growing fast.
It's growing fast, and he's going international. It's just an unbelievable story.
Yeah. So tune in next week for Secret Leaders.
And honey money.
Queen Bee.
I'm Chris.
I'm Dan.
And this was Secret Leaders.